Welcome. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. In the dark room, the only candlelight illuminated the vague silhouette of a child hunched over an old heavy book. The flickering glow revealed the child's small frame as he flipped through pages beneath the weak light. The book itself gave off an ominous aura bound in unknown leather, with occasional wisps of black smoke curling from its pages. A short, bald-headed house elf, with a thick pig-like nose and large bat-like ears bristling with white hair, appeared in the dim room. "Third Master, the lady's funeral has been completed. Do you have anything else to ask of Creature?" the elf rasped, his voice hoarse and croaky like a bullfrog. At Creature's words, the boy's hand paused mid-turn. After a moment of silence, he slowly turned to face the elf. Through the moonlight filtering in from the window, the boy's face was revealed. Under tousled black hair was a strikingly handsome face, dark grey eyes gleaming with quiet light exuding the calm refinement of a young British noble. But his pale skin and dark circles spoke of exhaustion well beyond his years. He sighed and asked quietly, "It's all done then? What were the other family's reactions, my inheriting the Black family's legacy?" Creature nodded. "Yes. Third Young Master, the family estate has been fully transferred to your name. At the funeral, Miss Narcissa was deeply sorrowful, but Miss Bellatrix was quite agitated. She was displeased by your absence. Aside from the rich family, I think it's Malfoy, showing some ambition toward your inheritance. The other families did not react." The boy gave a small nod and jumped off his chair. "Yes, jumped." From a distance, sitting upright and surrounded by shadow, the child had appeared to be a youth. But now, standing, his small stature made it clear he was only around 3 or 4 years old. He looked up at Creature, and the Selwyn family, who came from their side. "Mr. Elrond," Creature replied. He was once on very good terms with the Third Young Master. Before he left, he asked Creature to convey his condolences. The child nodded and said no more on the matter. "All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Take me to my room." Creature obediently lifted the child into his arms and carried him out of the study, ascending the stairs. The house they were in was a 5-story mansion, the ancestral home of the Black family at number 12, Grimmauld Place. From the outside, the house looked ancient. Its black-painted door was scratched and weathered, with a silver snake-shaped handle. No keyhole, no mailbox. As a pure-blood wizarding home, such things were unnecessary. The door could only be opened by magic, and letters were delivered by owls. The basement housed the kitchen, surrounded by rough stone walls, and lit only by a distant fireplace. It also contained a small dining room and a storage space for 2. The first floor, at ground level, opened into a long corridor lined with peeling wallpaper, threadbare carpet, gas lamps and snake-themed chandeliers. Blackened portraits of ancestors lined the walls, along with an umbrella stand made from troll legs, all symbols of an ancient pure-blood lineage. The second floor's stairwell was lined with the mounted heads of deceased house elves, proud servants who had given their lives to the Black family. Creature, too, looked forward to one day joining their ranks. This floor also held the drawing room, several bedrooms and a bathroom. The drawing room stood in contrast to the rest of the house. It was elegant and stately, with a tall window overlooking the street. 2 fine glass display cabinets flanked the fireplace, and most notably one wall bore the ancient tapestry of the Black family tree, filled with names and faces of past family members, though some had been burned away and removed. The third floor contained only 2 rooms. One of them was the child's bedroom, high-ceilinged with a bed, wardrobe and an empty portrait frame. That frame once held an image of his ancestor Phineas Nigellus Black, a former headmaster of Hogwarts, and the one whose name the boy shared. He was Phineas Walburga Black Jr. The 4th floor mirrored the 3rd. The 5th floor, however, was different. It held 3 rooms, once belonging to his eldest brother Sirius Black, his second brother Regulus Black, and his mother Walburga Black. But all of them were gone now. From any perspective, the house showed its long years of decay and neglect. Its ruin could be traced to Walburga Black, the boy's recently deceased mother, who had become increasingly unstable in her final years, fanatically supporting the Dark Lord before his downfall, but all that is a tale for another time. Now Creature carried young Phineas into his bedroom and gently set him down. "Third Master," Creature croaked, "according to the lady's last wishes, you will be leaving for Sigla in a few days." Phineas frowned. Scala, a special school in the wizarding world, was reserved for members of ancient, noble, pure-blood families. Only those who had experienced a magical outburst before their 7th birthday could enter. Families like the Blacks, Selwyns and Longbottoms were eligible. Scala wasn't a typical magic school. It was more like a military academy, a place of high-level, disciplined magical training. The instructors who taught young wizards at Scala were all exceptional, masters in manipulating magical power, renowned potion masters, or experts in alchemy. Take for instance Albus Dumbledore, the legendary white wizard, widely respected across the wizarding world. His friend, Nicholas Flamel, was a master of alchemy. Despite the school's powerful faculty, many families were reluctant to send their children there, because Sigala's teaching methods were brutal. Students were forced to experience the Imperius Curse and the Cruciatus Curse firsthand. With the exception of murder, almost anything was permitted. A savage environment where only the strong survived. Scala. No, Phineas shook his head when he heard the name. Creature hesitated, clearly troubled. "But, Madam," said Phineas, interrupted sharply. "Creature, remember, I am your master now. Mother is dead, my second brother is missing, and my eldest brother is in Azkaban. You can only obey me now." Upon hearing this, Creature slammed his head against the wall and wailed. "Creature is a bad elf. Creature doesn't listen to his master. Creature is unworthy." Phineas sighed. "Enough. Creature, I'm hungry. Go and prepare some food." Creature nodded, about to leave, but Phineas suddenly recalled something. "Oh, and Creature, over the next few days, go to the Ministry of Magic a few times, see if there are any young house elves for sale. Buy a few." Creature's ears drooped at the command, but he nodded and vanished with a pop. This was the unique magic of house elves. While they were commonly associated with domestic magic, cleaning, cooking, and organizing, they were capable of far more. House elves were not natural-born creatures. They were the result of ancient blood magic, a blend of goblin and elven blood, created by early wizards to serve. That same blood magic bound them to the service of wizards, instilling unwavering obedience in nearly all of them. Though there were rare exceptions, most were loyal and obedient servants. As for refusing Sigla or purchasing new house elves, Phineas had his reasons. Under normal circumstances, a young wizard from a respectable magical family wouldn't decline an invitation to study at Sigla. The school's entry standards were notoriously strict. A child had to display a magical outburst before the age of 7, a sign of extremely high magical talent. The requirements were even stricter for prestigious families. Sigla only admitted children from the old established families, the so-called Presbyterian families like the Selwyns and the Ridge. Technically speaking, the Black family no longer met the standard in terms of power or influence. Yet the Black family had history, one of the original pure-blood lineages. They were related by blood to nearly every other noble wizarding family in Britain. Some of the elder members of the Black family were still alive. Although they rarely appeared in public, they spent their time pursuing arcane magical knowledge and the mysteries of magical origin. They had no interest in day-to-day affairs. The Blacks were also different in how they approached Sigla. The Selwyns, for example, would send any descendant who met the criteria. The Blacks, on the other hand, selected only the most gifted of each generation. With centuries of pure blood intermarriage, even cousin-to-cousin marriages, like that of Phineas's parents, their most talented children were often born from the main bloodline. Originally, Phineas had not been chosen to attend Sigla, but in 1978, when he was just 1 month old, he experienced an intense magical outburst, so powerful that the Black elders unanimously agreed to shift their support to him. They believed he would qualify for Sigla and eventually join the ranks of the reclusive family elders. Those elders were some of the most powerful living wizards in the Black family, venerated by their kin though completely uninvolved in family politics or responsibilities. In truth, Phineas had been passed over for heirship at birth, but fate intervened. His brother's ambitions ruined them both. One vanished without a trace. The other rejected the family, was disowned. and ended up in Azkaban. This left Phineas with a choice. If he entered Sigilo, the family heirship would pass to the young black girl who had originally been chosen. If he refused, then the girl would go in his place, and he would retain his role as heir. From this angle, why would Phineas agree to attend Sigilo? But the truth was more complicated. Phineas carried a secret from birth, one no one knew. He wasn't really Phineas Wahlberg. Black, or rather, he was, but not entirely. He was a transmigrator, a traveler from another world who had taken the place of the real infant Phineas at the moment of his birth. In his previous life, he had watched the Harry Potter movies countless times. That familiarity made the world around him oddly comforting. Attending a foreign school like Sigilo was too risky. Hogwarts, known and predictable, was the better option, and he had another reason. Like many fictional travelers, he had a system. It appeared during his magical outburst, and had been with him ever since. The problem? It was still in closed beta, not yet fully activated. Its activation condition was receiving the Hogwarts acceptance letter. That was the true reason Phineas chose not to go to Sigilo. The system, called the Strongest Wizard, had only one active feature so far: daily tasks. Completing them earned either magic points or gems. In the wizarding world, power wasn't just about magical strength. It was about magical value, the richness, control, and versatility of one's magic. Older wizards were generally stronger for this reason. But there were exceptions. Today, Phineas's magical value was already close to that of a third or fourth year Hogwarts student, all earned through completing system tasks over the past 2 years. Gems were the currency of the system. The interface showed a mall, a family treasure chest, and a library, but these were still inaccessible. So far, Phineas hadn't earned a single gem. Every task had involved reading and studying various magic books, all rewarded only with magic points. But that would change once he was accepted into Hogwarts, and from there his real journey would begin. Kreacher was efficient. By the next day he had completed the task Phineas gave him and returned from the Ministry of Magic's elf settlement with 5 young house elves, all newly independent. Most wizarding families wouldn't consider such a purchase. For one, these elves lacked mastery in household magic and would need to be trained. For another, large wizarding families typically had their own bloodline of house elves. Kreacher, for example, was born into the Black family and would die in service to it, just as his parents had. After death, their heads were severed and mounted on the wall as a mark of honor, at least according to ancient Black tradition. Third young master. I have brought the house elves you requested, Kreacher announced respectfully. Phineas looked at the group trailing behind Kreacher, nodded, and said, Kreacher, have a few of them study Eastern cuisine. They'll handle the kitchen from now on. You can assign the rest to manage the household cleaning. Then pick one with potential in magic to assist you in looking after me. He paused, then added, Oh, and Kreacher, you and the others need to learn basic combat magic. I'll need protection for myself and this house. Kreacher bowed low. Kreacher understands. Phineas gave a small, satisfied nod, then looked pointedly at Kreacher's filthy rag. Go find yourself some proper clothes. It's shameful to appear like this beside me, but remember, these are not gifts. They're your uniform. You still serve me. Kreacher's eyes brimmed with tears. He was about to bash his head against the wall, when Phineas quickly continued, That applies to the other elves too. No more pillowcases or rags. I don't want to be embarrassed. Giving clothes to a house elf traditionally implied freeing them, but if done under a master's explicit command, it didn't count. That was Phineas's approach. He wasn't about to liberate them, but he could at least treat them with a degree of dignity. As a time traveler with memories of another life, Phineas could enjoy the convenience of house elves without treating them as true slaves. Still, he fully understood their place in wizarding society. House elves had no concept of privacy and could bypass magical protections. Hermione's original attempt to free them was admirable, but naive. It would have upended centuries of magical society. So, while Phineas wouldn't disrupt tradition, he could improve their living conditions. Besides, being part goblin and part elf, house elves had remarkable magical talent. Teaching them combat magic would strengthen household security, and with their nature, there was no fear of rebellion. One more thing, Kreacher. Go to Hogwarts and find Professor Dumbledore. Give him this locket, and tell him about my second brother. Kreacher was startled. He hadn't mentioned Regulus Black to Phineas, but he didn't question orders. House elves never did. In a blink he vanished. Phineas watched with envy. Though he would eventually master apparition through his system, he found the inability to teleport inconvenient for now. The family had assumed that if Phineas declined to attend Sculler he would live with relatives. After all, he was still only 3. He looked closer to 5 due to his fast development, but age was age. Still, he had no intention of going to live with any of them. He knew exactly who his relatives were, and none were suitable. There was Bellatrix Lestrange, his eldest cousin and a fanatical Death Eater, soon to be imprisoned for attacking the Longbottom family. Then Andromeda Tonks, the only cousin close to his eldest brother, had married a Muggle-born wizard, and was disowned. The family would never allow Phineas to stay with her. Narcissa Malfoy, his youngest cousin, had married into the Malfoys, though technically not imprisoned for her role with the Death Eaters. Thanks to a lot of gold, Phineas had no interest in living under Voldemort's shadow. Living alone at number 12 Grimmauld Place was the best option. That's why he had sent Kreacher to find Dumbledore. About half an hour later, Dumbledore arrived at Grimmauld Place with Kreacher. "Good day, young Mr. Phineas Black," Dumbledore greeted with a kind smile. "Your house elf gave me this locket claiming you instructed him to do so. I presume you know what it is." Phineas nodded and waved Kreacher away. "You may go. And Kreacher, prepare 2 glasses of honey water and some cockroach clusters. Our headmaster is quite fond of them." Kreacher obeyed instantly, returning shortly with the requested refreshments before vanishing again. Dumbledore regarded the candy and honey water before him, then fixed his twinkling gaze on Phineas. "It seems you know quite a bit for someone so young, Mr. Phineas." Phineas gave a small shrug. "As the heir to the Black family, it's not unusual. We Pureblood families are full of secrets. I'm sure as a member of the Dumbledore family yourself you understand that well." Dumbledore nodded. "Well, let's get to the point. You know what that locket is, don't you?" Phineas nodded. "I do. It's exactly what you're thinking, Headmaster. A foolish, misguided piece of magic." "You call it foolish magic?" Dumbledore asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes. I don't believe someone with your experience doesn't know this magic was originally created to split the soul as a desperate means of survival under a soul curse. That man took it too far. Horcruxes may make the soul harder to destroy, but immortality through them is a fantasy. The soul is damaged, emotions become unstable, and any magic requiring positive emotion becomes difficult if not impossible to perform." Dumbledore sighed. "Yes, he lost his way. But I'm still not sure how deep he's gone into the darkness. Let's set that aside for now. Since you mentioned Regulus Black and gave me this locket, I assume you need something." Phineas nodded. "Yes, Headmaster. I need your help casting a Fidelius charm on this house. I want its existence completely hidden." Dumbledore frowned, studying him for a moment. Then he said, "Very well. Who will be the secret keeper?" "I don't trust anyone in the Black family right now," Phineas said with a slight smile. "Could you serve as my secret keeper?" Dumbledore looked surprised. "What are you afraid of?" "I don't think you're unaware, Headmaster, of what happens when a child inherits the Black family legacy. There are people outside with ill intentions toward the family. My older brother was unjustly sent to Azkaban. You know that as well as I do." Dumbledore nodded. "Yes. It's still hard to believe Sirius betrayed James. They were like brothers." "Exactly. Even if the Black family supported Voldemort, my brother joined the Order of the Phoenix. I can't believe someone like him would become the Potter's secret keeper, much less betray them. He was arrogant, flashy, but not the type to be chosen for something that important." Dumbledore's eyes brightened. "So if he wasn't the secret keeper, someone else betrayed them." He paused. "Very well, let's proceed. But you know you could be your own secret keeper. You did say you don't trust anyone." Phineas blinked. He hadn't thought of that. "True, but I still trust you, Headmaster. If the greatest living wizard can't be trusted, then there's no hope for this world." Dumbledore chuckled. "In that case, I look forward to seeing you at Hogwarts, but I insist you should be your own secret keeper. I already carry too many secrets." He winked. Phineas bowed. "Then I'll leave it to you, Headmaster." The Fidelius charm was one of the most advanced forms of protective magic. It sealed a secret within the soul of a living person, and required immense magical power. A single mistake could cause irreversible damage. Luckily, Dumbledore had cast it before. With practiced ease, he wove the spell over the house. From that moment, no one, not even owls, could find it unless Phineas revealed the location himself. When the spell was complete, Phineas whispered the location to Dumbledore. He would still need to receive his Hogwarts letter, and it was best to have Dumbledore deliver it personally. Now that it's done, I'll be going. Oh, and while I'm often busy, if a young wizard writes me to ask about magic, I usually find the time. Dumbledore gave him another wink before leaving. Phineas understood his message. Dumbledore wasn't offering private tutoring out of flattery. He simply wanted to prevent another Tom Riddle. Phineas muttered to the empty room. Trying to stop another Voldemort, huh? He turned. Creature, the old house elf appeared instantly. Take me to Ollivander's one shop. Actually, Gringotts first. With a snap of Creature's fingers, they dissipated into Diagon Alley. It was the heart of magical commerce in Britain, full of top-tier shops and essential services. Phineas's priorities were clear. Gringotts and Ollivander's. The Gringotts building stood out even among the crowded shops. A tall, white structure at the edge of Diagon Alley near Nocturne Alley. It was known as the safest place in the wizarding world, after Hogwarts. Gringotts was run by goblins, known for being stern, secretive, and brutally efficient. Only they could guide wizards to the underground vaults via high-speed minecarts, and only they could open the vaults themselves. Phineas's goal was straightforward: withdraw money. At the entrance stood two doors. The first was a gleaming bronze gate, guarded by goblins in crimson and gold. The second door, made of silver, bore an inscription: Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned. Beware of finding more than treasure there. Crossing that threshold meant entering the main banking hall. The interior was vast and lined with polished marble. Dozens of goblins sat behind a long counter, scribbling in enormous ledgers and managing wizarding wealth. Phineas walked into Gringotts and approached a goblin. Hello, I need to access the Black Family Vault. The goblin scrutinized Phineas for a moment before asking, Do you have the key, sir? Phineas retrieved a small, ornate key from his pocket and handed it over. Of course. Here. The goblin examined it carefully, nodded and said, Very well. Please follow me. He led Phineas and Creature through a side door next to the main hall, revealing a narrow stone passage lit by burning torches. It was Phineas's first time in Gringotts, unsurprising given his age. The passage sloped steeply downward, and a long rail track ran along the floor. Under the goblins' guidance, they climbed into a small, rickety cart. The cart took off, speeding through the dark tunnels, deeper and deeper into the earth. They eventually arrived in a vast, underground cavern lined with massive gates carved into the stone. But those were not their destination. The cart continued to the very lowest level of Gringotts, reserved for the ancient vaults of the 28 sacred 28 families. These families, among the most powerful in wizarding Britain, had secured their treasuries here since Gringotts was founded. Many of them even held shares in the bank. Finally, the cart came to a halt in front of an enormous gate made of some unknown blackened metal. It radiated a silent menace. No spell could force it open. Only goblin magic could unlock it. Carved into the top of the gate was a striking crest, a shield bearing a mountain, 2 5-pointed stars and a short sword. On either side leapt a pair of silver greyhounds, the Black Family emblem. The goblin turned to Phineas. Sir, the key, please. Phineas handed it over and watched silently as the goblin began a complex series of motions. With a low groan, the gate unlocked and creaked open. Inside was a colossal underground vault. Gold galleons lay in loose piles, scattered across the floor. The word discarded came to mind. Not because the coins were unimportant, but because everything else in the vault was arranged with far more care. Phineas didn't head toward the gold. Instead, he made his way to a far corner of the vault, where the family records indicated something more valuable was kept. Sure enough, it was there, a time-worn box marked with the Black Family crest. It was clearly ancient and bore signs of age. but it also radiated potent magic. This wasn't just a magical container, it was a legacy. Unlike modern space-expanding items, this one was crafted with supreme care and rare enchantments. Rumor had it that decades ago Newt Scamander himself had carried a similarly enchanted case built with the help of professors and students at Hogwarts, one that housed his magical beasts. This box was smaller than Newt's, but it was far rarer. In the wizarding world, it was well known that objects imbued with the undetectable extension charm, also called the traceless stretching spell, couldn't be stored inside other magically expanded spaces. Attempting to do so would cause catastrophic magical instability. Yet this box was unique. Not only could it be safely stored inside other expanded spaces, but it could also accept additional enchantments, like a shrinking charm without harm. Even more impressive, the box had ironclad secrecy charms. Only members of the Black family, or those explicitly recognized by them, could open its true contents. Once bound to an owner, even other family members couldn't access its deeper spaces without permission. "All right, creature, grab some galleons. We're leaving," Phineas said, handing the box to the elf. He gave only a vague instruction on how much to take. He didn't care. The Black family was wealthy beyond imagination. Maybe not the richest in the wizarding world, but certainly among the top. After thanking the goblin, Phineas and Creature made their way to their final stop, Ollivander's wand shop. Ollivander's, despite its renown, was a small and rather shabby storefront. Peeling gold letters on the door read, "Ollivander's, makers of fine wands, since 3080 BC. In the window sat a single wand on a faded purple cushion. The shop's interior was cramped, with nothing but a single bench and stacks upon stacks of narrow wand boxes piled to the ceiling. A fine layer of dust coated everything. As Phineas stepped inside, a bell rang shrilly. "Ah, a young wizard," said a soft voice from behind the counter. "What can I do for you?" Phineas looked up and saw a pale, elderly man with white hair and silvery eyes. Garrick Ollivander himself. "Oh, do forgive me," the wand maker continued, glancing at Creature. "I didn't notice the house elf. You must be Mr. Phineas Black. I assume you're here for a wand." Phineas nodded silently. He knew well who Ollivander was, another member of the Sacred 28, and the most respected wand maker in all of Britain. The Ollivander family had been crafting wands since the 4th century BC, and though other wand makers existed, nearly every young witch and wizard in the UK came here to buy their first wand, including him. There was something special about the Ollivanders. They remembered every wand they ever sold and its owner. Because of this, although pure-blood families continued to buy wands from Ollivander, they also held on to ancient family wands passed down through generations. They didn't completely trust outsourcers. "Yes, I need a wand," said Phineas. Ollivander's eyes lit up. "Oh yes, every young witch or wizard who comes here needs a wand. According to the Ministry of Magic's regulations, I cannot sell wands to those who haven't received their Hogwarts acceptance letter. However, I believe I can make an exception for the heir of the Black family. So, young Mr. Black, which is your dominant hand?" Phineas raised his right hand. "Right hand, sir. Also, you may call me Phineas, there's no need for Mr. Black." Ollivander nodded thoughtfully. "Very well. The Black family often favors wands with dragon heartstring cores. Let's try this one. You know, it's not the wizard who chooses the wand, it's the wand that chooses the wizard." He handed Phineas a wand. Walnut, 13 inches, but the moment Phineas touched it, Ollivander snatched it back, shaking his head. No, that's not it. Close, but not quite. Let's try this. Blackthorn, dragon heartstring, 14.5 inches. Phineas gave it a try, but after a few awkward swings, he knew it wasn't right either. "Oh, definitely not. You are a picky one." Ollivander chuckled. "What about this? Hornbeam wood with a dragon heartstring core. 13 inches. Quite flexible." Phineas reached out, and the moment his fingers closed around the wand, he felt a distinct resonance, as if it wasn't just a wand but a part of himself. Ollivander's eyes sparkled. "Ah, yes, that's the one. Congratulations, Phineas. A wand like this is highly attuned to its owner. It won't work well for anyone else. It has strong principles and a sense of identity. The dragon heartstring core will allow it to master spells quickly and with brilliance, though it's known to change allegiance more easily than others. Fortunately, the hornbeam wood balances this tendency, keeping the wand loyal and steady. You're bound to become a great wizard just like your ancestors. Phineas nodded and asked, "Thank you. So, how much is it?" Ollivander smiled more broadly. First-year Hogwarts students typically receive a school subsidy and a discount on their first wand. But Mr. Black, I doubt someone of your status would care for such discounts, and at your age, you're not eligible anyway. 35 galleons. Phineas gave a small nod and Creature stepped forward to hand over the coins. Only then did Ollivander truly notice Creature, dressed in a tailored suit bearing the Black family crest, like the butler of a noble house. The sight startled him. After all, giving a house elf clothing usually signified releasing them from servitude. Yet Creature, despite his clothing, remained loyal and obedient. It was peculiar. Just then a chime rang in Phineas's mind. Ding. The host has obtained a wand. Some system permissions have been activated. Magic book interface unlocked. The voice in his head made Phineas instantly change his plan. Rather than visiting the bookstore, he told Creature to take him straight back to 12 Grimmauld Place. Phineas understood well. The system was more important than books. Even with his exceptional talent rare, even among magical prodigies, he knew one thing: only living geniuses become legends. Now that he was alone, the sole heir to the entire Black fortune, he had become a target. In the eyes of many dark wizards, Phineas Black was the ripest prey. His only real ally was the system and perhaps a few old families still loyal to House Black. Many wizarding families were connected to the Blacks by blood or marriage. But in today's world, those bonds meant little. Take the Malfoys, for instance. Narcissa Malfoy was his cousin, and yet given the chance they'd likely betray him to take his inheritance. So who could he really trust? There was Dumbledore, perhaps, but Phineas didn't fully trust him either. That old schemer manipulated those closest to him with terrifying precision. He even used his own death to further a plan. Still, Dumbledore's influence could help protect him. For now, other than him, there were only a few remaining families that might be trusted. The Weasleys were one. Arthur Weasley, head of the family, was the great-grandson of Phineas's great-uncle. His wife, Molly, was related to Phineas by marriage. Kind-hearted and lacking ambition, the Weasleys were blood traitors in the eyes of many purebloods. But to Phineas that made them safer. Then there were the Longbottoms. Phineas didn't want to approach them. His cousin Bellatrix had driven Frank and Alice Longbottom mad with the Cruciatus curse. Despite the blood ties, Frank Longbottom, now damaged beyond repair, was also his cousin. But enough about the others. Phineas arrived home, dismissed Creature, and locked himself in his room to study the magic book interface the system had unlocked. It resembled a card collection book from his previous life, empty slots waiting to be filled. There were no spell names yet, just blank grids. Phineas knew the purpose of this interface. It was the true strength of his system. Any spell that appeared in the magic book could be instantly mastered. There were two ways to make spells appear in the book. First, he could use the gems earned from earlier tasks. Once the Maul interface was unlocked, he could exchange them for library passes that would allow him to extract spells. Another thing is that the spells that Phineas learned also appear in the magic book. These spells are recorded in the book, and Phineas can increase his proficiency through practice. Once his proficiency reaches a certain threshold, he'll be able to cast silently, or even without a wand. Of course, practice isn't the only way to improve. Otherwise, this system wouldn't be so powerful. Spells drawn from the library pass may be repeated. Repeated spells increase proficiency, and the amount gained is significantly higher than what Phineas could manage through practice alone. The key point is this: once a spell reaches the proficiency level where Phineas can perform it silently and wandlessly, that spell will no longer appear in future draws. This new interface caused Phineas to revise his original plan. Originally, he intended to learn as much magic as possible before starting school, unsure what the system could do. Now, however, he planned to focus on a few commonly used spells and practice them intensively. With the system's help, he believed he could achieve silent and wandless casting by the time he entered Hogwarts. Having made up his mind, Phineas chose to go into seclusion. In truth, that just meant staying indoors more and avoiding unnecessary outings. As mentioned before, no matter how talented or well-connected he was, it only mattered if he stayed alive. During these chaotic times, going out without protection was asking for trouble. Before retreating, Phineas made thorough preparations. The house had been placed under the Fidelius charm by Headmaster Dumbledore, with Phineas himself as the secret keeper. Unless he gave permission, not even an owl could find the place. Still, he told Dumbledore the location, since he needed the Hogwarts admission letter. He also instructed Kreacher to purchase an owl from Diagon Alley, for receiving the daily profit, keeping him informed of events in the wizarding world. Kreacher was also responsible for gathering daily supplies. Just like that, 9 years passed in a flash. Now 11. Phineas was finally ready to attend Hogwarts. Long time no see, Professor Dumbledore. When Dumbledore appeared before him, Phineas sighed internally. He wondered whether he should install defensive wards that prevented disapparition. The old man had shown up unannounced more than once. Dumbledore, seeing Phineas's displeased face, didn't mind at all. He knew the boy was simply annoyed by his sudden appearances. But with a small gift or benefit, Phineas usually cheered up. Well, long time no see, Phineas. Here is your acceptance letter. With a flourish, Dumbledore pulled an envelope from inside his robe and handed it to Phineas. Although he had long been certain he'd attend Hogwarts, seeing the letter in person still stirred something in him. In his past life, he had dreamed of receiving this exact letter, yellow parchment, wax seal and all. He'd imagined that at 11, an owl would land on his window with a letter sealed with the emblem of Hogwarts, lion, eagle, badger and snake encircling a capital H. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Phineas took the letter. Sure enough, the seal bore the Hogwarts crest. Majestic and familiar, he opened it without delay. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Confederation of Wizards, First Class Order of Merlin, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. Dear Mr. Black, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on 1 September. We await your owl by no later than 31 July. Sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress, Uniform. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black, 1 plain pointed hat, black for day wear, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar, 1 winter cloak, black silver fastenings. Please note all clothing should carry name tags. Textbooks. All students must have a copy of each of the following. The Standard Book of Spells Grade 1 by Miranda Goshawk, corrected name. A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory by Adel Borfling, corrected name. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emeric Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Philida Spore, corrected name. Magical Drafts and Potions by Arsenius Jigger, corrected name. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces. A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment. 1 wand, 1 cauldron pewter, standard size 2, 1 set of glass or crystal files, 1 telescope, 1 set of brass scales. Students may also bring 1 cat or 1 owl or 1 toad. Note to parents, first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. The format and content of the letter matched exactly what he remembered from the original series. Perhaps because Dumbledore delivered it personally, or because Phineas had hidden number 12 Grimmauld Place under the Fidelius charm. Professor McGonagall hadn't been able to send it directly. In any case, the envelope lacked the magically adapting address used in the books. Well then, Phineas, said Dumbledore, smiling and winking, I'll be waiting for you at Hogwarts. Seeing Dumbledore about to disapparate again, Phineas quickly interrupted. Wait a second, Dumbledore. Even if I'm well off, shouldn't Hogwarts at least provide the train ticket? Dumbledore paused, momentarily surprised. While Hogwarts doesn't provide tickets to young wizards from wizarding families, you'll need to purchase it yourself at King's Cross Station. Phineas blinked in surprise. He had clearly been misled by the version of the story he read in his previous life. After all, if Hogwarts provided every ticket, there would be no point in selling them at all. Besides, not every wizarding student takes the train, nor are they all 11-year-olds. Although the location of Hogwarts is magically concealed, nearly all witches and wizards know it lies near Hogsmeade, since the Hogwarts Express stops there. When Phineas realized this, he looked a bit sheepish and turned to Dumbledore as if he wanted to say something. But Dumbledore waved his hand gently, signaling it wasn't necessary. After all, Phineas had lost almost all his relatives at the age of 3. It was understandable that he wouldn't know such things. Smiling, Dumbledore said kindly, "All right then. I'll be waiting for your arrival at Hogwarts." Phineas nodded and snapped his fingers. With a soft pop, Creature appeared beside him. "Creature, bring the sweets I prepared." "Yes, master." Creature nodded and returned shortly with a large bag of candies. Phineas took the bag and offered it to Dumbledore. "Here you are, Professor. Cockroach clusters. Your favorite. I actually acquired the company that makes them and developed some new variations. I thought you might enjoy trying them." Dumbledore looked surprised as he accepted the package. "You bought the company?" Phineas nodded. "Yes. I was curious about what the candy you liked tasted like, so I bought some. Honestly, I found the flavor a bit too close to ordinary chocolate, so I bought the company and developed new kinds based on my own ideas." In truth, Phineas didn't really care much about the candy itself. He had done all this simply because Dumbledore liked them. Phineas was very aware of his situation in the magical world. The older members of the Black family had stopped caring about its future. As long as someone carried on the name and handled the ancestral rites, they didn't care who held the title. The Pureblood families weren't looking to destroy the Black family outright. What they truly wanted was to carve up its wealth. If Phineas was left with a token shop and just enough money to survive, that would be acceptable to them. In recent years, several families had shown interest in the Black estate, especially the Rich family, an influential force in the Wizengamot. Even though Phineas had hidden himself in number 12 Grimmauld Place, the Black family's wealth couldn't be concealed. Many properties had already been targeted and attacked. The only reason the family's holdings hadn't crumbled completely was due to their sheer size and value. But now Phineas was turning 11, and once he entered Hogwarts he could no longer hide at home, so winning the favor of a powerful figure like Dumbledore, a legendary white wizard, was essential. If he could appear loyal to Dumbledore, openly opposing Voldemort, then his daily life would be far less constrained. That was the reason behind the candy. Upon hearing that the candies were newly developed, Dumbledore immediately unwrapped one and popped it into his mouth. Cockroach clusters were, as their name suggested, shaped like cockroaches. Enchanted scurry about, they mimicked real insects, right up until someone ate them. The original version was simply a chocolate sandwich, but since acquiring the company, Phineas had experimented with several new flavors. One variant involved coating the chocolate with a fine dusting of coffee powder, adding a pleasant bitterness to the sweetness. Another, which Dumbledore happened to be tasting, had a hard candy shell, chocolate powder inside, and a gam core made from fruit juice blended with honey. The fruity tang and the natural sweetness made for an addictive flavor. Even Phineas had grown fond of these candies, despite their unsettling appearance. After all, not anyone could bring themselves to chew on something that looked like a cockroach. "This is excellent," Dumbledore said at last, savoring the flavor with closed eyes. "Thank you for the treat." Then he added, "I'll order a batch for myself. No need to inform the company." But Phineas waved a hand casually. "Don't bother, Professor. I've already arranged it with the company. A portion of each batch will be mailed directly to you." Dumbledore's eyes narrowed suddenly, his piercing gaze locking onto Phineas. It was clear he was using legilimency, trying to peer into the boy's thoughts. But Phineas remained calm. Although the strongest wizard system had not yet fully activated, it could already shield certain key secrets, such as the system itself, and his memories from his previous life. After a few moments, Dumbledore gave him a long, thoughtful look, then silently turned and left. The moment Dumbledore disappeared, a clear voice rang in Phineas's mind. Ding! System activation complete. Personal panel unlocked. Task system unlocked. House treasure chest interface unlocked. Library interface unlocked. Mall interface unlocked. Following the prompt, Phineas opened the various interfaces to check them out. Personal panel, name Phineas Wahlberger. Black Jr., house. None. Enrollment date, September 1. HP 2490. Average human 2000. Magic power 200. Average young wizard 100. Luck, exploration. Note from the author. The panel will only appear in full here. It won't be repeated often and it's not a major feature, just a way to digitize certain elements. Next was the task system. Currently it displayed only one task. Main task, enter Hogwarts on September 1 and participate in the sorting ceremony. Reward, 1 library pass. The house treasure chest interface was also available, but as Phineas hadn't yet been sorted, there were no treasure chests and no visible unlock conditions. It seemed he would only learn more after enrollment. Finally, there was the library interface, which Phineas considered the most critical feature. This interface, when combined with the spellbook interface, would allow him to draw spells. Library passes were consumed here. At the moment, the interface was empty. To use it, Phineas would need to bind it to either a real magic book or an actual library. Each library pass could extract 3 spells. These 3 spells were guaranteed to be different from each other, but not guaranteed to be different from those drawn with other passes. In short, using 2 passes might give you 6 distinct spells or 3 duplicates. The magic book or library used must truly exist, and only 1 binding was allowed for now. The last system interface was the mall. Its standard currency was still gems, but the prices were staggering. Even the cheapest item, a Hogwarts Marauders map, cost thousands of gems. Still, the selection was incredibly rich. Virtually any magical item that existed in the wizarding world could be bought here. Interestingly, the easier an item was to obtain in reality, the more expensive it was in the mall. For instance, the Philosopher's Stone was priced at 500,000 gems, while the Deathly Hallows were each worth hundreds of millions. In addition to magical items, magical creature cubs were also sold here. But they weren't cheap. A common bowtruckle cost the same as the Marauders map. In Phineas's view, many of these things were better obtained in the real world than bought in the mall. Gems could be exchanged for passes, and passes were the key to unlocking more magic and progressing in power. Still, that didn't make the mall interface useless. It also offered spells for purchase. The price for a specific spell was 10,000 gems, the equivalent of about 62 passes, each costing 160 gems. While it might not seem like a bargain, having the certainty of obtaining a designated rare spell made it worth it in some cases. Even more astonishing, the spells offered weren't limited to the Harry Potter world. As long as it came from a magical system, regardless of the universe, it could appear in the mall. This meant that with enough gems, Phineas could learn magic from other worlds and become the most powerful wizard alive. True to the system's name, the strongest wizard system. After going through all the system menus, Phineas felt more at ease. His hopes for the future had solidified. Ever since he had learned of his identity as the 3rd son of the Black family, he'd lived with constant anxiety. Despite his efforts to grow stronger over the past 9 years, fear had always lingered. Fear of Voldemort's inevitable return, fear of the ruthless Pureblood families who would tear a person apart for power. But now, for the first time, he saw a path forward. With the mission system, the house treasure chest interface, and the mall, he had concrete goals to pursue. Ultimately, his aim was to become strong enough to survive and protect himself. Creature. Master. With a soft pop, Creature appeared beside him. Go to Diagon Alley and buy the items on my list. Also take me to the magical creature shop. I need a pet. An owl alone won't do. As you wish, Master. After completing the shopping list, Creature took Phineas to the magical creature shop located on the south side of Diagon Alley. Unlike Elop's Owl Emporium across the street, which sold only owls and related goods, the magical creature shop carried a wide array of creatures. In addition to common pets like owls, cats, and toads, it also offered rarer magical creatures like fire crabs and shifting rabbits. Even ordinary animals such as ravens were available, and on occasion magical creatures like nifflers and belltruckles appeared, but those sold out almost immediately. The 2 shops also differed in atmosphere. Due to owl habits, Elop's was dimly lit and shadowy. The magical creature shop, on the other hand, was brighter though far more cramped, thanks to the sheer number of animals in cages lining the walls. "Oh, welcome young Master Phineas Black," said the shop clerk, a witch in her 30s, upon seeing creature with the black family crest. Though Phineas rarely ventured into the magical world, his use of the black crest made his identity clear. No one else could openly bear it. "Hello," Phineas said. "I need a pet. Any recommendations?" He wasn't surprised she recognized him. If he hadn't wanted to be noticed, he wouldn't have had creature carry the crest-marked box. The woman hesitated before speaking. "Well, Master Black, if I'm not mistaken, you're of age to attend Hogwarts. First-year students are only allowed owls, cats, or toads. I don't recommend toads, they're outdated. Unless you're a Potania, there's little reason to choose them." Phineas nodded. Among wizarding families, toads were primarily valued for their detoxification abilities and the potion ingredients they could provide. These days only potion masters or their kin still use them as pets. "As for owls," she continued, "your family surely has no shortage. If you're looking for a Hogwarts companion, I'd recommend a cat, or perhaps a magical creature of mild temperament. Many young girls like puffskeins, for example. We also just received a Kneasel this morning, very energetic." Phineas shook his head and glanced around. "I'll have a look myself." The clerk nodded, stepped back, and shut the shop door behind him. "Take your time. I'll make sure no one disturbs you." Phineas gave a brief nod and began inspecting the animals closely. He spotted the Niffler the clerk had mentioned. It was the last one in stock. Its fur was uniformly black and sleek, its snout perfectly shaped, and its coat showed no signs of stress or illness. There was, however, one unusual detail. A single streak of white fur ran across its forehead, giving it an odd appearance. That touch of strangeness caught Phineas's attention, but he had no intention of buying the Niffler. Nifflers were adorable and gentle by nature, but they had a destructive obsession with shiny objects. Left unattended, they would tear apart everything around them in search of treasure. Still, they had their merits. Nifflers were excellent at locating hidden valuables and especially sensitive light, useful traits in dark or mysterious places. Phineas raised his hand and called the female clerk over. "Master Black, what are your orders? Are you referring to the Niffler in the display?" The clerk approached respectfully. Phineas shook his head and pointed at the Niffler. "I remember that Nifflers can give birth to 6 to 8 cubs per litter, right?" The clerk nodded. "Yes. Typically a Niffler litter consists of 6 to 8 cubs." Phineas nodded again. "All right. I'll buy this Niffler, but I don't plan to take it with me. I'd like you to raise it until it gives birth. I only want one of the offspring. The rest, including the mother, can belong to your shop. My condition is that I must be present for the birth, and I'll take the cub immediately afterward." The clerk's eyes lit up in excitement. "Master Black, do you intend to raise a Niffler yourself?" "That's possible, but the training and care costs," Phineas interrupted with a nod. "I'll cover the expenses, but I require that the breeding partner be an exceptional Niffler, preferably one with unique traits." The clerk beamed. "Rest assured, we'll contact Mr. Scamander for that." Yes, the magical creatures shop was owned by none other than Newt Scamander, the famed author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Phineas's request was a welcome opportunity. His name alone would draw attention to the shop, and he'd agreed to cover all costs. For them, it was a win-win situation. "Master Black, would you like to see any other pets?" The clerk removed the sold Niffler from its cage. It wouldn't do to keep it on display now. Meanwhile, she asked again. Phineas nodded, his tone calm and assured. "Of course, I haven't chosen the pet I'll take to Hogwarts yet." Just as he finished speaking, his eyes locked onto a pair of strikingly mismatched ones. One a vivid golden yellow, the other a piercing crystal clear blue. Phineas felt a jolt of interest. He looked closer. It was a cat. Most of its fur was pitch black, with small patches of white on its forehead, paws, and tail tip. Its build was unusual for a kitten. A large head, round eyes, pointed ears, long legs, a sturdy waist, and a thick tail. It resembled a miniature black lion. Phineas was instantly taken. "Tell me about that cat," he said, pointing. The clerk followed his gaze and nodded. "This is a Linging lion cat, a rare breed from the East. It's sometimes called a whipping hydrangea. This particular kitten has heterochromatic eyes, which makes it even rarer. It's only 3 months old and has a hint of magical lineage, so it should live much longer than a typical cat." Honestly, it only arrived today. Any later and it would have been sold already. Phineas walked over and gently tried to scoop the kitten into his arms. But the little feline was quick, springing from his grasp in an agile leap. Very nimble, Phineas murmured with admiration. Then he took out his wand and levitated the kitten gently in the air, drawing it back toward him. That's the one. I like it very much, with the Niffler included. How many galleons altogether? Don't forget the care costs for the Niffler during the breeding period. The clerk's smile was so wide it nearly split her face. She hurried to the counter to tally the costs. Phineas paid her no mind, focusing instead on the kitten now resting still slightly wriggling in his arms. He smiled softly. Little one, settle down. You're coming home with me. As if understanding, the kitten ceased its struggles and looked up at him with those mismatched eyes, blinking lowly. Meow, meow. It tilted its head and then tucked itself into his arms, meowing once more before closing its eyes in contentment. Phineas chuckled and scratched its chin gently. Its fur was soft and smooth beneath his fingertips, and the kitten raised its little head in pleasure, purring faintly. Meow. Then, as if to return the affection, it stretched out its tiny tongue and licked his palm, surprisingly warm and soothing. Just then the clerk returned, bowed slightly and said apologetically, I'm terribly sorry for ignoring you earlier, Master Black. Phineas waved it off. It's fine. So, how much in total? The clerk nodded. The kitten is 82 galleons. The Niffler, including breeding and care costs, comes to between 300 and 400. We can round it to a total of 500 galleons. Phineas handed over the pouch of galleons. Very well. Make the arrangements. Yes, sir, the clerk replied with renewed respect. Author's note: based on conversion rates, 1 galleon, 5 GP or 10 USD. The price of the linging lion cat with rare traits aligns roughly with 3,000 RMB or 82 galleons. Phineas exited the magical creature's shop, with the kitten curled snugly in his arms. Creature was already waiting outside, having finished buying all his school supplies. Creature, let's go home. They disapparated together. The kitten, clearly unused to magical travel, wobbled unsteadily as they arrived. Phineas caught its clumsy motions with a smile and reached out to steady it. You little rascal, he said affectionately, stroking its head. From now on you'll be called Chocolate. The arrival of Chocolate brought great joy to Phineas. At first the little creature was panicked and frightened in the unfamiliar environment. But after getting used to the house elves, its mischievous nature came out in full force. The 6-story Black family mansion, including the basement, became a paradise for the energetic kitten. It jumped onto cabinets, darted under tables, and explored every corner freely. Unlike most cats, it wasn't lazy or aloof. Whether it was the unique breed or the dark, eerie atmosphere of the house, Chocolate proved to be anything but ordinary. Phineas didn't mind. House elves trained under Creature had long mastered the art of remaining unnoticed, so Phineas often felt like he lived alone. But now Chocolate brought life and warmth to the silent mansion. Amid Chocolate's daily chaos, time flew by. Soon it was August 31st, the day before departure for Hogwarts. Phineas had chosen to travel by train. Chocolate wasn't yet comfortable with apparition. But more importantly, Phineas wanted the opportunity to make friends. He wasn't a recluse or a scholar obsessed with magic. 9 years of solitude had only deepened his longing for companionship. As a pureblood wizard, Phineas had to purchase his own ticket, which meant arriving at the station a day early. Under Creature's guidance, Phineas visited King's Cross Station for the first time. The Hogwarts Express departed from platform 9 3/4, a platform invisible to muggles and inaccessible through conventional means. Naturally, tickets weren't available at any muggle booth. Phineas entered a public restroom on the station's right side and stepped into the second cubicle. It looked perfectly ordinary, except the flush button didn't quite work, though that was irrelevant. Drawing his wand, he tapped a small paper box fixed beside the toilet. A faint vibration ran through the floor. The toilet vanished into a hidden space covered by a wooden board, forming a new flat surface. The wall in front split open, revealing a hidden passage. After a short walk, he reached what looked like a muggle ticket booth. I need a ticket to Hogwarts, Phineas said calmly. He didn't specify the date. The Hogwarts Express only ran 6 times a year, September 1st, Christmas, Easter, and the end of term. Unless under special circumstances, the train always departed at 11 a.m. sharp on September 1st, from platform 9 3/4, bound for Hogsmeade. In exchange for a few nuts, the wizarding clerk handed Phineas a ticket. That evening, Creature carefully packed all of Phineas's school supplies into an enchanted trunk. Phineas, cradling chocolate in his arms, went to bed early, filled with excitement and anticipation. He woke just after 5 the next morning. Despite the maturity of his previous life's memories, he was still nervous. After all, Hogwarts, a school he'd once dreamed of, was finally within reach. Phineas hadn't slept well. Rubbing the sleepy chocolate beside him, he sat up, snapped his fingers, and had breakfast served to his bedside by a house elf. It was a luxurious start to an important day. After a hearty meal, he dressed casually. He refused to wear the Hogwarts robe yet. It was cumbersome and ugly, only useful within the school itself. Most wizards in the Ministry of Magic wore modern attire these days. He planned to change into his school robes on the train. By 10 a.m. Phineas and Creature apparated directly to platform 9 3/4, bypassing the Muggle section entirely. The Scarlet steam engine stood proudly at the platform, its polished front bearing the inscription Hogwarts Express. Departing at 11 Heron, steam hissed around the crowd of students and families. Cats wove between legs and trunks, owls hooted from cages, and luggage clattered noisily against the ground. Among the bustling crowd, Phineas stood out. With only one suitcase and a house elf by his side, he looked calm, collected, and entirely in control. Even so, the excitement in his chest was undeniable. From time to time, students leaned out of the train windows to speak with their families, while others argued over seats. Phineas saw only 2 such scuffles. Ignoring the commotion, Phineas found an empty compartment. After shutting the door behind him, he quietly read Transfiguration Today. It was a scholarly journal focused on the latest developments in the field of transfiguration. Beyond publishing advanced research articles, it also featured spellcasting techniques and practical advice, making it accessible even for beginners. One reason Phineas was drawn to it: he understood the importance of transfiguration in wizarding duels. While specific combat spells held their own, transfiguration could be the decisive factor. When combined with other branches of magic, it became even more formidable. Both Albus Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall had contributed articles to this journal, and each had received its most promising newcomer award. As often happens during deep study, time slipped away unnoticed. Without warning, the train began to move. In the corridor, 2 red-haired boys wrestled while a black boy watched with amusement. Further down, returning students caught up on summer adventures, and new students exaggerated tales of their flying prowess or Quidditch skills. Some first years, still without seats, knocked on compartment doors in search of space. Yet no one approached Phineas. Even before he had officially entered Hogwarts, he was being avoided. Word of his identity had spread. A few Muggleborns seemed curious, even eager to befriend him, but they were held back by the half-bloods around them. "Is that him?" one whispered. "Oh yes. Look at the badge on his trunk. Who else would flaunt that family crest? I heard he's an orphan." "Well, that's what you get for siding with him." "Shh! Don't say that so loud." "Why not? You Gryffindor scared." They were traitors anyway. The whispers grew, unrelenting. Even someone as self-possessed as Phineas couldn't ignore them. He understood the reason for the whispers, and the isolation. It was inevitable. To the Gryffindors, the Black family had supported Voldemort. Phineas was spared Azkaban only because of his age. To Slytherins, the Blacks were blood traitors. Sirius Black's alignment with Dumbledore in the last war had cost them dearly, and then Sirius's betrayal of the Potters, his imprisonment. To both sides of the conflict, the Black family was despised, and now Phineas, the last of them, was a convenient scapegoat. But few dared act against him directly. The Black family was, after all, still one of the most powerful pure blood lines in existence. No one knew how many wizards were related to them, how many businesses, vaults, and alliances still operated in their name. Still, the weight of judgment pressed on him. He slammed the magazine closed and pulled out his wand. With a flick, he transfigured the water glass on the table into a niffler and sent it scurrying into the corridor. Even a conjured creature obeyed its nature. Predictably, it created a delightful commotion and gave Phineas a brief moment of peace. He retrieved Chocolate from his enchanted trunk. Its interior space vast enough for the kitten to roam freely, and cradled the cat in his arms. Petting a cat really did soothe the soul. Meow! Chocolate, disgruntled at having his playtime cut short, voiced his protest. Phineas ignored him. Instead, he pulled a sliver of dried fish from his coat pocket and offered it as an apology. By now the train had long since left London, cutting through green farmland where cows and sheep grazed lazily. Phineas watched the countryside blur past, absent-mindedly stroking the kitten's back. Chocolate, sensing his master's quietude, stopped meowing. He settled into Phineas's lap, content to receive the massage. Time passed slowly, and around 12:30, another noise stirred the hallway. This time it wasn't a quarrel. It was the arrival of the trolley witch. The door slid open, and she peered in with a polite smile, a dimple showing at the corner of her mouth. "Would you like anything from the trolley, dear?" Though she smiled, Phineas could see the fear behind her eyes. He sighed quietly. To many in the magical world he must seem like something dark and dangerous. Still pushing the discomfort aside, Phineas bought everything on the cart. He kept some snacks for himself, and instructed the trolley witch to distribute the rest to students who couldn't afford any. He made no speech about it, nor asked for thanks. It was simply a small gesture, an attempt to soften his image in the eyes of his peers. Even if the odds were slim, Phineas still wanted to try. The experiences of the past 9 years had made Phineas yearn for friendship and family more than ever. Unfortunately, these were the very things most out of reach for him at this time. After a short period of calm, the train finally began to slow as it approached Hogsmeade Station, signaling their arrival at Hogwarts. Phineas stood and put on his specially tailored Hogwarts robe, which bore a nameplate engraved with his name. Though the robe concealed a full set of casual clothes, it was well made and not uncomfortable to wear. A voice soon echoed throughout the train. "We will arrive at Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage in the carriage. It will be brought to the school separately." Phineas didn't rush to leave his compartment. He knew the corridor would be packed with students. Noisy, crowded, and chaotic. Better to wait a few minutes and avoid the crush. Sure enough, once the worst of the crowd had passed, the corridor became more manageable. Not all the students had disembarked, but Phineas was no longer in danger of being jostled and shoved. Following the flow of students off the train, he stepped onto a small, dark platform. The evening air was cold, and a biting wind made even Phineas, clad in 2 layers, shiver slightly. A flickering lantern bobbed up and down in the distance, rising above the students' heads. Then came a loud, booming voice. First years over here." The voice belonged to Rubeus Hagrid, Hogwarts gamekeeper and one of Headmaster Dumbledore's most loyal supporters. A half-giant, Hagrid had once been a student himself, before being expelled under unfortunate circumstances. Kind-hearted though he was, Hagrid's warmth didn't extend to Phineas. Not with his last name. With his thick hair and beard nearly obscuring his face, Hagrid's bulky form weaved through the crowd like a giant bear. "Come on now. Any more first years? Mind your step. Follow me." He held the lantern aloft, though perhaps not intentionally, as his great height made it seem that way regardless. The first years stumbled after him down a narrow, winding path flanked on both sides by forest. It was dark and steep. Hagrid guided them with loud encouragement. "You're about to see Hogwarts for the first time. Just round this bend." And just like that, the trail opened up. A vast black lake stretched before them. At its far end, perched between 2 towering peaks, was the magnificent castle of Hogwarts. Its many towers and turrets sparkled with light under the starry sky. "Hello, Hogwarts," Phineas whispered to himself. In his previous life, what child hadn't dreamt of turning 11 and receiving a letter with a grand H and 4 house crests, delivered by an owl tapping at their window? No one ever got that letter back then. But now he had made it. "4 to a boat," Hagrid called out, pointing toward the boats moored along the shore. Just as on the train, most students avoided Phineas. No one wanted to share a boat with a black. But the number of boats was fixed to match the number of first years. Being alone wasn't an option. Eventually a boy and 2 girls hesitantly climbed into the boat with Phineas. Everyone in Hagrid bellowed from the lead boat. Once he was sure no one was left behind, he shouted, "Right then, forward!" As the boats glided across the lake, one of the girls sitting with Phineas asked timidly, why does everyone seem afraid of you?" Her question made the other two students stiffen in fear. Their faces paled visibly. Phineas glanced at them and instantly understood they were likely half-bloods or purebloods from families loyal to Dumbledore. He turned to the curious girl and gave her a small smile. "Your parents are muggles, right? You know what that means, don't you?" She nodded shyly. "Yes, ordinary people who can't do magic. Professor McGonagall explained when she visited us." "Right," Phineas said, nodding. "That's why you don't know." He raised his hand slightly, flashing the ring of the House of Black. "I'm from the Black family, one of the sacred 28 pure blood families. That alone makes others either afraid of me or hate me." The girl looked puzzled, clearly unfamiliar with the legacy of war in the wizarding world. Phineas sighed, then continued gently, "You've heard of Voldemort?" "Yes. My family was one of the few that openly supported him during the last war. So many half-bloods and muggle-born families now see us as dangerous." The girl trembled slightly. Her confusion had turned into unease. "But I don't support him," Phineas added quickly. He was unhinged. Mad, really. The other two students stared at him in shock. Even after 9 years, Voldemort's name still evoked fear. Saying it aloud was enough to unnerve even the bravest. Phineas, however, was unmoved. He shook his head in disappointment. In his eyes, Voldemort had been a narrow-minded fanatic, a man with grand ideals but no real vision, more terrorist than revolutionary. He didn't even expand beyond Britain. The first Dark Lord had global reach. Voldemort? Just a local tyrant. The two magical-born students looked stricken, as though he'd uttered the unthinkable. "Phineas," Ceres shrugged. "That's why they fear me." Phineas pointed to the two little wizards on the same boat and said, "As for the other pure-blooded little wizards, it was because of my eldest brother, who openly opposed Voldemort. When Voldemort fell, my parents had passed away and my second brother disappeared. I did not help any Death Eaters. According to some family information, many people were reported through Professor Dumbledore, so the descendants of these Death Eaters reject me and even hate me." Now the little witch understood that the handsome and aristocratic young man in front of her had offended almost everyone in the wizarding world. Therefore there was a hint of sadness in the eyes she looked at Phineas with. Phineas saw the worry in the little witch's eyes, and couldn't help but sigh. She was really a kind little witch. "Don't worry about me. I can still handle this." "I haven't asked yet. What is your name?" "My name is Phineas Black. And I have the same name as a former headmaster of Hogwarts. He is my ancestor." The little witch was obviously a little flattered, especially in front of a boy who had scared her before but now seemed sympathetic. My name is Angelina Johnson. Nice to meet you." Phineas smiled and looked at the other two little wizards. "What about you?" Because of Phineas's explanation, the two little wizards were no longer so afraid of him, so they spoke.
"My name is Roger Davies."
"I'm Alicia Spinnet." While the four of them were talking, the fleet glided smoothly across the mirror-like water. Except for Phineas and the others, everyone else was silent. His earlier explanation had been heard by everyone, including Hagrid. This made Hagrid, who didn't have any good feelings for Phineas, grow quiet. He felt that Phineas had been living alone all these years. However, his transformation was not known to others. As the fleet drew closer to the cliff, where the castle stood, the young wizards had to look higher and higher to take in the magnificent view. "Lower your heads," Hagrid shouted as the boats reached the edge of the cliff. The young wizards naturally followed his instructions. However, when the boats passed through the ivy-draped entrance of the waterway beneath the castle, the students discovered that the only one who actually needed to duck was Hagrid. Eventually they docked at an underground port. Judging by the surroundings, it was clearly not a commonly used path, perhaps one reserved for first years. From there they climbed a rocky, mossy path covered in pebbles. After a long trek they reached a patch of grass beneath the towering castle. The massive oak front doors loomed ahead. The young wizards stopped instinctively. Hagrid stepped forward and turned around. "Is everyone here?" Once he confirmed it, he knocked 3 times on the massive door. Each knock sounded like a hammer blow. The door opened at once. Standing there was a tall witch in emerald green robes, with black hair and a serious expression. Phineas recognized her. He had read her article on the train not long ago. She was the deputy headmistress of Hogwarts, and the one who wrote the admission letters to new students, Professor Minerva McGonagall. Hagrid's next words confirmed it. Professor McGonagall, the first years are all here. Professor McGonagall nodded. Thank you, Hagrid. I'll take them in. She pushed the door open, revealing the great entrance hall. It was so vast it could probably contain an entire Muggle house. The walls were brightly lit with flaming torches. The ceiling soared high above them, and a grand staircase of white marble led upwards. Under Professor McGonagall's guidance, they crossed a flagstone floor patterned with colorful banners. After a short walk, they reached a door behind which they could hear the chatter of hundreds of students. Professor McGonagall turned to face them. First of all, welcome to Hogwarts. Her voice was loud and commanding. The start of term feast will begin shortly. But before that, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting ceremony is very important, because while you are here, your house will be your family. You will have classes, sleep in the same dormitory, and spend free time together in your house. There are 4 houses: Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin. Each has its own noble history and has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are here, your triumphs will earn your house points. Any rule breaking and you will lose points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will do your best to bring glory to your house. She paused, then added, the sorting ceremony will take place in front of the entire school. I suggest you take a moment to tidy yourselves up. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and several of the young witches and wizards hurried to straighten their robes or soothe their hair. Satisfied, Professor McGonagall gave a small smile. We will call you in when we are ready. Until then, please wait here quietly. With that, she turned and left. Efficient and to the point. After she departed, a wave of whispers broke out. The students were wondering aloud how the sorting would work. Hogwarts had a long-standing tradition of not revealing the details of the sorting ceremony to new students. It was a shared secret among all who had been sorted. Amid the whispers, Professor McGonagall returned. Now move forward. The sorting ceremony is about to begin. She raised her voice over the crowd. Form a line and follow me. Although the whispers had irritated her slightly, she showed no anger. After all, they hadn't broken any rules. The young wizard stepped through the doors ahead, and into a magnificent hall. In this hall there were 4 long rows of tables, with many senior students from Hogwarts seated at them. Above each row of tables hung flags of different colors and patterns. Phineas knew that these were the flags of the 4 Hogwarts houses. The tables were covered with gleaming gold plates and goblets. Thousands of candles floated above the hall, illuminating the entire space. The ceiling above was black, dotted with stars resembling the night sky outside the castle. Phineas knew that this enchanted ceiling not only mimicked the starry sky but also reflected the changing seasons and weather outside. Directly in front of the hall was a long table where the teachers sat. The first years stood to one side, looking at the hall's grand layout and the thousands of faces staring at them. Professor McGonagall quietly placed a 4-legged stool in front of the professor's table, facing the 4 house tables. Then she placed a pointy old and worn wizard's hat on top of the stool. Suddenly, all attention in the hall turned to the hat, and a slit like a human mouth appeared on its edge. A somewhat hoarse voice emerged from the gap. Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hats sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head, the sorting hat can't see, so try me on and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on. Don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none. for I'm a thinking cap, wide. When the hat finished its song, the entire hall erupted into warm applause. It bowed to each of the 4 house tables, then became still again. This was the famous sorting hat once belonging to Gryffindor. Ravenclaw had cast the eternal legilimency curse on it, though a weakened version. It could sense the mental state of the young wizard and some aspects of their character. Professor McGonagall stepped forward with a long roll of parchment. When I read your name, please come up, put on this hat, and sit on the stool to be sorted. The first name on the list was Phineas's. Phineas Black. It seemed that the list was in alphabetical order by last name, which is why he was at the top. Phineas walked toward Professor McGonagall. She gave him a deep look, but in her eyes, Phineas didn't see any disgust or rejection, which made him feel more at ease. He took the old sorting hat, sat down, and placed it on his head. Young Black, noble blood, and great ambition. You're a perfect fit for Slytherin. The voice of the sorting hat rang in Phineas's ears. You're already quite knowledgeable for your age, and your curiosity about magic is commendable. Ravenclaw might also be a good fit. Of course you have courage and loyalty, so Gryffindor and Hufflepuff would suit you as well. Well, this is a tough one. Let me think. Yes, Slytherin seems like the place for you. Your ambition and bloodline will be well suited there. Phineas's heart skipped a beat. He knew exactly what being sorted into Slytherin would mean. Unfortunately, the sorting hat didn't give him a chance to refuse, so he shouted loudly, "So Slytherin. Damn, I really wanted to go to Ravenclaw," Phineas thought. After removing the hat, Phineas cursed under his breath. Slytherin's table was the second on the right. Phineas walked over, found an empty seat, and sat down. As he moved, the other students parted like dominoes, forming a clear space around him. No one wanted to talk to Phineas, nor did they want to get involved with him. There was no applause or cheers for Phineas's sorting into Slytherin, only rejection. It was a strange and tense atmosphere. Professor McGonagall, noticing the silence, could do nothing. The sorting ceremony tradition at Hogwarts had been the same for thousands of years. It was unchangeable. She called the next name in her loud, commanding voice. Cedric Diggory! A tall, handsome boy walked up, placed the old, worn hat on his head, and sat there quietly. A moment later the sorting hat shouted, "Hufflepuff!" The students from Hufflepuff cheered and applauded as Cedric walked to the far right and joined them. Even the Hufflepuff ghost, the fat monk, waved at him happily. "Roger Davis, Ravenclaw," the sorting hat called. And Roger jumped off the stool and walked to the second table on the left. It was Ravenclaw's table, and once again warm applause followed. Several upperclassmen shook hands with Roger. It was a harmonious and friendly atmosphere. Merton Graves, Ian Puce, Lee Jordan, Elias Spinett, Kenneth Toller, Fred Weasley, George Weasley, Angelina Johnson. One by one the other students from Phineas's boat went through their sorting ceremonies. Some joined Gryffindor, others Ravenclaw. However, after Phineas, there was an odd, uncomfortable silence. Something that even Phineas, who had prepared himself for this, could not ignore. Finally, Professor McGonagall rolled up the parchment in her hand and left with the sorting hat and the 4-legged stool. However, the plates in front of the young witches and wizards remained empty. At that moment, Professor Dumbledore rose to his feet, opened his arms and beamed at the students. "Welcome," he declared. "Welcome to Hogwarts. Welcome to a brand new school year. Now, before we begin our feast, I have a few words to say, and they are nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak, thank you." With that, he sat back down. A moment of silence passed before the students burst into applause and laughter. At last it was time to eat. Phineas noticed that the once empty plates were now piled high with food: roast beef, roast chicken, pork, lamb, sausages, bacon, steak, and more. There were also vegetarian options: boiled tomatoes, roasted sweet potatoes, potato wedges, Yorkshire pudding, carrots, mint humbugs, and even some ketchup. Even Phineas, who had grown up with the finest meals, had to admit that the food at Hogwarts was exceptional. The house elves' skill in the kitchen was evident. After sampling a few bites, Phineas looked coldly at the students seated near him at the Slytherin table. "I suppose none of you are eager to share a dormitory with me, are you?" A mix of embarrassment, fear, and distaste flickered across their faces. Phineas understood. He put down his knife and fork, looked at the group and said slowly, "If I recall correctly, Slytherin has an old tradition, one the other three houses have long abandoned." One of the younger boys widened his eyes in disbelief. "You mean the prefect duel system? You want to be a prefect? That's impossible." His voice cracked as he shouted, drawing attention. The faces of the surrounding students turned sour. An older Slytherin glared at Phineas and said sharply, "You blacks don't deserve to be our prefects." Phineas sneered. "Oh? You think any of you are a match for me? From the moment I realized how your precious pure-blood families view mine with rejection and greed, I never stopped honing my magic." The younger boy looked flustered. "That doesn't mean you're worthy to be a prefect." Phineas shrugged. "Perhaps, but what can you do about it? No one outside our year group can participate in the ceremony. You'll have no choice but to lose to me. Accept it. For the next 7 years I'll be your classmate and your prefect." He leaned forward slightly, voice colder. "And I'm rather curious to see how you'll all manage under the authority of a black you hate and scorn." Faces around him twisted with anger, frustration and resentment, but no one spoke up. Some still believed they could defeat Phineas, but none wanted to face the shame of failure. Slytherins were known for ambition, yes, but also for shrewd calculation. No one wanted to make a costly mistake. One boy, Adrian Pusey, studied Phineas carefully. Unlike the loud one earlier, his voice was calm. "Let's be clear, none of us are going to let you become a first-year prefect, no matter what. So, what are you after?" Phineas gave him a faint smile. "You're smarter than the others. That's good." He gestured dismissively toward the shouting boy from earlier. "I don't need the title, just the perks. So physically the private room. That's all I want." Adrian raised a brow. "You're certain that's transferable?" "Of course not. Prefect appointments aren't transferable, but the dormitory assignments can be flexible, right? I'll throw the duel and let your chosen candidate win. In exchange I get the private room." Adrian thought for a moment, then nodded. "Deal." Phineas grinned. Hogwarts prefects had some authority-limited point deductions, access to a private bath, and in Slytherin's case, a private dormitory and bathroom. But with authority came responsibility, monitoring younger students, maintaining order, even managing passwords. Phineas had no interest in those obligations. He knew his situation in Slytherin would be difficult. The disdain was written all over his housemates' faces. Sharing a dorm with them for 7 years would be unbearable. Some might say children warm up to each other quickly, that friendships form in days. That might be true in Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, or Ravenclaw, but not in Slytherin. Slytherin was a miniature pure-blood society. Alliances and rivalries were often inherited from family feuds. Some were friends from birth, others were enemies before they even met. This was Slytherin, a house built on ambition, cunning, and self-interest. Soon the meal wound down. The leftover food vanished from the plates and the dishes sparkled clean. Then desserts appeared, cakes, puddings, tarts, and more. When dessert concluded, Dumbledore stood once more and the hall fell silent. "Now that we've filled our bellies, a few announcements. First, let us welcome Professor Jonathan Reed, who will be teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts to all years this term." A polite round of applause followed. Next, a few reminders. First years should remember that the Forbidden Forest is strictly off-limits. Our caretaker, Mr. Filch, has asked me to remind you that magic is not to be used in the corridors between classes. And lastly, Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of term. Anyone wishing to play for their house should see Madam Hooch to sign up. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled as he lifted his wand. "And now, before we all head off to bed, let us sing the school song." He gave his wand a flourish. A long golden ribbon unfurled from its tip, rising above the head table and curling into words. "Everyone choose their own tune. Ready? Sing." Following Dumbledore's words, nearly everyone in the Great Hall erupted into a chaotic chorus. "Selfish, warty Hogwarts, please teach us. Whether we are old or bald or a young lad with twitching knees, let our heads be filled with new and curious things, for they are now stuffed with air, dead flies, and bits of fluff. Teach us what's useful, help us recall what's been forgotten, make us strive, care and learn until our brains decay." At that moment Phineas finally understood why the professors had looked so pained when Dumbledore had announced the school song. With no fixed tune, each student chose their own rhythm and tempo, some slow, some fast, resulting in a dreadful medley of clashing melodies. It was less of a song, and more of a full-on auditory assault. He wasn't sure how long the performance lasted, but when the last warbling voice trailed off, Dumbledore applauded with what looked suspiciously like tears in his eyes. Phineas strongly suspected those were tears of suffering rather than sentiment. Music, Dumbledore said, smiling. A magic beyond all we do here. Well, it's time for bed now, children. Phineas rose with the Slytherin students and followed the older prefects out of the Great Hall. They descended the marble steps, past murmuring portraits, into the castle's depths. Of the 4 houses, only Slytherin and Hufflepuff had underground dormitories. With Slytherin's being the deepest, the kitchens lay directly beneath the Great Hall. Hufflepuff's dormitories were adjacent to them, but Slytherin's common room was deep within the dungeons, reachable only by navigating a series of dim corridors and descending stone staircases. Eventually they arrived at a stone wall etched with the house symbol, a snake, its tongue flicking outward. Pure blood, the prefect declared, and a door appeared in the wall revealing the Slytherin common room. It was a long, low chamber with walls and ceiling of ancient stone bathed in a deep green hue. Gothic-style decorations lined the space, twisting sculptures, rich tapestries depicting Slytherin legends and flickering fireplaces. But most striking of all were the tall windows revealing the inky waters of the Black Lake beyond, distorted by shifting currents. Occasionally the silhouette of the giant squid or other lake-dwelling creatures swam past, casting shadows over the room like specters. "Quiet," said the female prefect. "I'm Gemma Farley, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Slytherin House. Our emblem is the serpent, cunning, intelligent, and resourceful. Our colors are emerald, green, and silver. As you can see, our common room is hidden in the dungeons, and its windows open to the lake depths. It may seem eerie now, but we find its peace quite magical." She gestured around them. "Before turning in, there is one final task. Here in Slytherin we maintain an ancient tradition abandoned by the other houses. The first years must determine among themselves who will serve as the year's prefect." Before she could explain further, Professor Snape entered silently, his black robes billowing behind him. "First years to the center of the room," he commanded in a cold tone. "I don't care how you do it, but only one of you will remain standing. That student will be the first-year prefect. Begin. Now. Don't waste my time." Just as he'd expected, Phineas stood motionless while the others began to quarrel and cast clasp spells at one another. It was pitiful, really. 11-year-olds, barely past their first magical outbursts, trying to duel with spells they barely understood. Their control was minimal, their magic weak. Phineas, by contrast, had the advantage of the system. His mastery was on par with upper-year students. Some of the more reckless first years attempted to target him directly, hoping to catch him off guard. It didn't go well. With fluid movements, Phineas silently transfigured nearby chairs and tables into ropes, binding each attacker effortlessly. In the end, it was just as he predicted. Adrian Pusey remained the last standing. "So," Phineas said casually, walking over, "do you still want to fight me for it? Or shall we stick to our agreement?" Adrian looked from the magically conjured ropes to Phineas and gave a slow shake of his head. "You can have the dormitory," he said, his voice steady but with a note of reluctant admiration. "A deal is a deal." Unlike the others, Adrian didn't harbor much resentment. He understood that the enmity with the Black family had little to do with Phineas personally. The events surrounding the fall of the Death Eaters would have unfolded with or without him. As the only heir to the Black name, and with magical skill far exceeding his peers, Adrian knew better than to make an enemy of Phineas. He extended an olive branch, hoping for an alliance rather than rivalry. Phineas didn't care much for the politics behind Adrian's gesture. He simply hoisted his suitcase and turned to Snape. "Professor, where is the prefect's single dormitory?" Snape's lips twitched, as though suppressing a remark, but he pointed silently to a corridor branching from the common room. Phineas stepped into his new quarters. The prefect's dormitory was far more spacious than a standard room. It included a private bathroom, with its own bathtub decorated with green marble and polished silver fixtures. He exhaled slowly, dropped his suitcase by the bed, and looked around. Privacy. Peace. In Slytherin. That was worth more than gold. Phineas stood at the entrance of his new dormitory, mentally picturing how the space would transform. According to Slytherin house rules, this dormitory would belong solely to him until he graduated. Snap. Phineas snapped his fingers, summoning Creature, the house elf of the Black family, along with several other elves. Creature, lead them and start transforming this place. First, change that bed. I want something grander. The standard Slytherin bed was too plain for Phineas, who had grown accustomed to the luxurious one at Grimmauld Place. Make it bigger. Add a plush carpet to the floor. Since Hogwarts house elves maintained the rooms, a thick, cozy carpet wouldn't be a problem. Phineas pointed to a corner. Place a cat climbing frame there. Stock it with chocolate toys, snacks, and whatever else fits a proper play area. By the window where there's a fireplace, put a single sofa. I want 2 rows of bookshelves on either side, and bring all the books from my room at number 12 Grimmauld Place. Use the undetectable extension charm to make space. All Hogwarts dormitories had permanent undetectable extension charms, but the space was still limited. Creature and the others worked efficiently, transforming the room to Phineas's liking until it felt just right. Of course, most importantly, Phineas had Creature add protective enchantments to the door, ensuring no one could enter without permission. He knew his unique position in the house. It was only wise to prepare for anything, even midnight attacks. Fortunately, it was Friday night and the next 2 days were a weekend, giving Phineas ample time to explore the castle often dubbed the safest place in the wizarding world. Despite the late hour, Phineas couldn't sleep, partly due to the new surroundings, partly because he had unfinished business. He hadn't had time to check the system since the sorting ceremony. Congratulations on joining Slytherin House. The house treasure chest is now unlocked. You may open it after earning 100 class merit points. Achievement unlocked. Noble bloodline. All dark magic levels. Mission complete. Enroll in school and attend the sorting ceremony. Reward library pass X1. Phineas smirked slightly as he looked at the library pass, then opened the system's library interface. As before, it required a binding. System bind to the Hogwarts library. Binding failed. Physical object scan required. He frowned. That meant a night trip was in order. Night walks were practically tradition at Hogwarts, though mostly among the Gryffindors. Slytherins rarely risked it. Ravenclaws wouldn't waste study time breaking rules, and Hufflepuffs typically hung around the Kirches near their common room. Technically, wandering the castle at night was against the rules, but only if caught. Phineas drew his wand, pointed it at his chest, and whispered, "Disillusionment charm." He'd only recently learned the spell and hadn't fully mastered it yet. It allowed the target to blend into their surroundings, like a chameleon, far more effective than an invisibility cloak in some ways, since it covered the entire body. Gently, Phineas pushed open the Slytherin common room's stone door and stepped into the damp, shadowy corridor. He remembered the library's description from his previous life. Located on the 2nd floor of Hogwarts Castle, it housed thousands of bookshelves and tens of thousands of books. The primary reason he wanted the system to bind to it. Nearly every book in the wizarding world could be found in the Hogwarts library. The library closed at 8 in the evening. It was long past that now, not a problem for Phineas. He'd just need an unlocking spell. The vast room was just as he imagined: towering shelves, endless aisles, and the restricted sections at the far end. System bind to the Hogwarts library. Real object detected. Scanning and binding. Binding successful. Rewards. Library pass X3. Gems X1. Phineas smiled, pleased. Now it was time to test his luck. Standing in the center of the library, he used one of his passes for his first card draw. Some things never changed. Phineas had been lucky in his past life, and apparently that hadn't changed. From 4 card draws he gained Transfiguration X2, the Patronus Charm, and the Termination Curse, a powerful spell that ends all active curses. Truly lucky. Transfiguration spells encompass many categories: reparo, duplication, alteration, and Phineas's draw granted him +1 proficiency to all of them. "Who's there?" A raspy voice pierced the silence, thick with malice and resentment. "Oh, a first year. Surely." wandering into the library on his first night. Let's catch him and string him from the ceiling. Give him a good whipping. What fun that would be. It was Argus Filch, Hogwarts' cantankerous caretaker. Being caught by him would mean more than a mere point deduction. As a known squib, his resentment of young wizards was palpable. Phineas quickly recast the disillusionment charm to stay hidden. After all, if no one sees you, it doesn't count as breaking the rules. A moment later, Filch's hunched figure entered the library, followed closely by his scrawny black cat, Mrs. Norris, whom he treated like a cherished companion. Because Phineas used the disillusionment charm, he was not discovered by Filch. However, it clearly wasn't the right time to return to the common room. Filch was still patrolling the corridors. If the Slytherin common room entrance were to open, it would surely catch his attention. Still, staying hidden under the disillusionment charm wasn't a wise option either. Phineas was only a first-year student, and even adult wizards struggled to maintain that spell for extended periods. Filch remained in the library, clearly obsessed with catching whoever had disturbed the peace. Seeing this, Phineas didn't dare remain any longer. He slipped out through the slightly ajar door, careful not to make a sound. Outside in the corridor, he exhaled a quiet sigh of relief. Though Filch was a squiddy, he was not to be underestimated. He had been Hogwarts' caretaker for decades, even during Sirius's school years. To control dozens of young witches and wizards despite lacking magic himself was no small feat. If not for his squib status, Filch might have been a formidable wizard, but being born into a pure-blood family and lacking magic had left him bitter and extreme. His resentment toward magical students was palpable. Hogwarts was peaceful at night, a stark contrast to the lively feast from just hours ago. The portraits on the walls were mostly fast asleep. Phineas kept his wand unlit, moving by moonlight alone. Even so, he occasionally disturbed a dozing painting with his footsteps. Eventually he reached the 7th floor, home to the headmaster's office. But that wasn't his destination. He stopped instead in front of a tapestry depicting Barnabas the Barmy attempting to teach ballet to trolls. This was the secret entrance to the Room of Requirement, a chamber even longtime Hogwarts students rarely knew about. Hidden behind the tapestry, the entrance would only appear if the seeker concentrated on what they needed, then walked past the wall 3 times. Phineas thought firmly, "I need a place to rest," and paced in front of the wall. As expected, a smooth, handleless door emerged. He opened it and stepped into a luxurious lounge. Without hesitation, he collapsed onto the plush bed and fell fast asleep. The next morning, the shrill ringing of a magical pocket watch startled him awake. It was a family heirloom enchanted to detect evil magic nearby and serve as an alarm. Phineas always kept it with him. In his position, caution was survival, though it was the weekend. Today the class schedules were being handed out in the Great Hall. If Phineas missed it, he'd have to ask Creature to prepare meals separately. So despite his fatigue, he forced himself up. The castle by day was nothing like it was at night. Everything buzzed with life, and magic seemed pulse through the very stones. Hogwarts had 42 staircases, some broad and steady, others narrow and rickety. Some changed destinations or vanished without warning. Others required polite requests or specific actions to open. Some doors weren't doors at all, merely illusions on solid walls. Even the portraits wandered, visiting one another. Armor clanked restlessly in the corridors, and statues offered no reliable landmarks. The sheer unpredictability of it all was overwhelming. Compared to number 12 Grimmauld Place, Hogwarts was a marvel of enchanted chaos. After breakfast, Phineas had planned to explore the castle more thoroughly. Unfortunately, he had underestimated his situation. The night before, only a handful of students, those from magical families, had known who he was and shunned him. But word had spread overnight. Gossip traveled fast in a school full of curious, chatty students. Phineas had been the only student at the sorting ceremony to be openly rejected by a house. Naturally, everyone wanted to know why. Now not only had Slytherin turned its back on him, but it seemed the rest of the school had too. At breakfast, no one sat beside him. Even students from other houses avoided the seats nearby. Afterward, in the corridors, students paused upon seeing him, then quickly walked away as though merely sharing air with him was dangerous. Wherever he went, Phineas felt the weight of stairs and heard the hush of whispers trailing behind him. It was deeply irritating. Maybe Hogwarts wasn't the sanctuary he had imagined. Perhaps Pureblood had been the better choice, but it was too late for regrets. The sorting was over. The choice had been made, and whatever he had left behind, especially Sculler, was already gone. In the end, Phineas, unable to bear the strange looks from others, chose to stay in his private lounge for 2 full days. Fortunately, the lounge contained a large number of magical books, which kept him from becoming bored. In truth, Hufflepuff might have been a better fit for Phineas. It was the only house at Hogwarts where almost no one deliberately avoided or isolated him. The Hufflepuffs, known for their loyalty and inclusivity, didn't go out of their way to shun him. Finally, September 3rd arrived, marking the official start of classes. Slytherin's Monday morning began with Defense Against the Dark Arts, a course notorious for its ever-changing professors. This year's professor was someone named Jonathan. Professor Jonathan E. Reed had the bearing of a military man, strict, composed, and distinctly British in demeanor. His teaching style, however, was surprisingly humorous, frequently using vivid examples to help young witches and wizards understand the material. The Slytherins and Gryffindors were paired together for this class. As usual, the two houses, long-time rivals, frequently clashed with taunts and small disputes during their lessons. All of this, of course, excluded Phineas, who sat alone in the last row. He hadn't expected the level of isolation he now experienced. When he entered the classroom, small groups of students were already scattered across the seats. Knowing the subject's inconsistency over the years, Phineas chose a seat in the very back, not wanting to attract attention. That's when it happened. The moment he sat down, the students near him immediately packed up their things and moved away, as if he was something filthy. The closest student to him was now separated by an entire row. When Professor Jonathan entered the room, he noticed this strange arrangement, but said nothing. What could he say? Force others to sit next to Phineas. "I'm Jonathan Reed, your Defense Against the Dark Arts professor for this term," he announced clearly. "Put your textbooks away, you won't need them in my class." He glanced meaningfully at Phineas before walking to the front of the classroom. "Before accepting this post at Hogwarts, I looked into the curriculum," he continued. "Turns out, there isn't much of one. For various reasons, almost every Defense Against the Dark Arts professor has only lasted a single year. I too signed a 1-year contract with Headmaster Dumbledore." As he spoke, he raised his wand and drew several intricate images in the air, depictions of various dark creatures. This course is divided into 3 core parts: dark creatures, defensive spells, and curses. In a perfect world, you'd study each over the course of 7 years, gradually preparing to defend yourselves from real threats. But we're not in a perfect world, so I'm going to teach you as much as I can while I'm here. With that, he tossed his textbook aside. "You won't need the book. What I'll be teaching goes beyond it. Today we'll begin with something simple: the wand lighting charm and the wand extinguishing charm. And you, young man," he pointed to a boy in the front, "you can put your hand down. I don't ask questions in class. These 2 charms are among the most commonly used spells in the field," he went on. "Light is the enemy of many dark creatures. Ghosts can be scattered momentarily by sudden brightness. Even werewolves and vampires may retreat under strong magical light." Phineas noticed something odd. When Professor Jonathan mentioned vampires, his expression stiffened for a moment. Phineas had learned these spells years ago, so he didn't pay close attention to the lecture. Instead, he began to study the professor himself. Jonathan had only appeared once during the welcome feast, and had left promptly after Dumbledore's introduction. He hadn't been seen in the Great Hall since. While professors weren't required to dine with students, his absence was still unusual. Now, observing him closely, Phineas noticed several things. The professor had closely cropped hair, revealing scalp on the sides. His face was pale and haggard, shadowed by a well-trimmed beard. His pupils were an eerie grey-white, and he wore heavy layers of clothing, almost as if trying to shield himself from the cold. All of these signs made Phineas suspect that Professor Jonathan might be a vampire. Of course, that wasn't definitive vampires, though, Undead like Inferi could use their blood to appear perfectly human. Temperature, scent, and even appearance could all be magically disguised. Time passed quickly. While Phineas observed, the class drew to a close. As a defense against the dark arts professor, Jonathan proved more than competent. Even while teaching such basic spells, he gave detailed scenarios in which they could be life-saving. It was clear from his examples that he had extensive experience surviving in the wild. His delivery carried the weight of personal experience. Despite not using textbooks or engaging students in traditional questioning, his teaching was engaging. He allowed practical spell use and wasn't overly strict, quickly earning the admiration of the students. Slytherin's afternoon class was the most tedious subject at Hogwarts. History of magic. And calling it tedious was generous. The class was taught by Professor Binns, the only ghost professor at Hogwarts. Binns had taught at the school for decades. Even in old age, when most wizards would have retired, he continued lecturing. According to legend, he fell asleep in the staff room one night, died, and simply rose the next morning as a ghost, leaving his body behind and heading straight to class. Even after death, he never stopped teaching magical history, but his lectures were unbearably dull. Professor Binns spoke in a monotone without inflection, and without ever pausing for breath. Most students could barely stay awake 10 minutes into his class, and on hot days 5 minutes was enough to nod off completely. When Phineas regained consciousness, the history of magic class had already ended. He sighed inwardly. Professor Binns must be a masterful wizard, he mused. Otherwise, how could he lull every student to sleep and have them all wake up just as class ends? Indeed, Hogwarts lived up to its reputation. Phineas resolved to be more vigilant in the future. As night fell and dinner concluded, most students scattered, some enjoying the last golden rays of sunlight outside, others gathering in the common rooms to chat and play, while still more buried themselves in the library's vast sea of books. Phineas, however, returned alone to his dormitory. His presence in the Slytherin common room remained unwelcome. Perhaps knowing that he wouldn't retaliate within Hogwarts walls, his peers had grown bolder. The exclusion had worsened from whispered gossip to direct sarcasm and deliberate acts of social isolation. If he reached for a book, someone would snatch it away first, even if they had no intention of reading it. If he sought a seat, it would be claimed before he got there, even if the person already occupied another. No one discussed lessons with him, no one talked about Quidditch, and no one traded chocolate frog cards. They simply acted as though he didn't exist. Eventually, Phineas gave up and retreated to his room with Chocolate, his loyal pet, for company. Elsewhere in the castle, Professor Jonathan climbed the moving staircases to the headmaster's office on the 7th floor. Not everyone at Hogwarts was either bustling with worry or aimlessly idle. Few were both. But Albus Dumbledore's was one such exception. He had no classes to teach, no lessons to prepare, no homework to grade, and no dormitory rounds to manage. Yet, he bore the weight of the entire school, and the burden of deeper concerns like the boy who had vanished 9 years ago, a boy believed by many to be dead. But Dumbledore knew better. "How is he?" the headmaster asked quietly as Jonathan entered. Jonathan sighed. "Dumbledore, it's not good. He's completely isolated, not just by his housemates but by most of the students at Hogwarts." Dumbledore's expression tightened. He exhaled deeply. "It's our fault," he admitted. Jonathan looked him in the eye. "You woke me from my deep sleep, asked me to protect the students for a year. I agreed. That makes me their teacher. And as their teacher, I won't stand by while that child suffers like this. I need to know the truth." Dumbledore studied his old friend, an old comrade from another time. He said nothing at first. Jonathan didn't press him. He called an elf to bring a special drink, then sat down and sipped in silence, waiting. After a long pause, Dumbledore finally spoke. "You've been asleep since the incident, so you don't know all that's happened in recent years. But I assume your unique awareness has told you some things." Jonathan nodded. "Your deranged student who called himself Voldemort. I've picked up pieces. In our day, lunatics like that weren't even worth our time." Dumbledore shook his head slowly. "He may be mad, but he's also a genius. In many magics he surpassed me, faster, deeper. It's a tragedy that he chose darkness." Regret and guilt flickered in the headmaster's eyes. He had failed to steer Tom Riddle down a better path. Phineas is connected to him. Dumbledore continued. He was born into the Black family. You know what Voldemort preached, pure blood supremacy. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. So his family supported Voldemort. That's why Phineas is rejected? Not entirely, said Dumbledore. Phineas has an older brother who sided with us, but was later framed as a traitor. I've never been able to prove his innocence. That stain passed down to Phineas, and many of our allies resent him for it. And the Slytherins? Jonathan asked. A boy from the noble house of Black should be a prince in that house. Dumbledore sighed. 8 years ago, after inheriting the Black family's assets, Phineas gave us damning evidence. Proof that several pureblood families had secretly supported Voldemort. Many of those families suffered greatly because of it. Some barely survived, but the move protected Phineas and his inheritance. He bought himself time breathing room before his enemies could attack. Jonathan let out a long breath. Even as a doctor, I can see how astonishing that decision was for a child. Yes, said Dumbledore. He struck hard, and we helped him. The families he exposed knew what he'd done. Their descendants have not forgotten. Jonathan frowned. Still, he could have been placed in a different house. He would have fared better anywhere else. You're right, Dumbledore agreed. At that moment, the sorting hat resting quietly on its high shelf spoke. I made no mistake. That Black is a true Slytherin, ambitious, talented, born of power and nobility. No house suits him better. Dumbledore and Jonathan exchanged weary looks. They had underestimated the boy. And now, in the midst of rejection and hatred, the question lingered. How will he rise above it all? How will he change his fate? Jonathan's responsibilities as a professor made him unwilling to stand by and do nothing. Dumbledore, are we just going to watch this happen? I know you understand that child's talent. If he's allowed to grow, his achievements may far surpass even your deranged former student. But if we let him develop in such a hostile environment, he might become someone even more dangerous than Tom. Dumbledore sighed deeply. I know, but there's nothing we can do right now, at least not yet. Jonathan gave Dumbledore a piercing look. You don't trust him. You don't trust an 11-year-old child. You're testing him. You want to see how he'll react in this situation, don't you? Dumbledore gave a slow nod. Jonathan, I'm not like you. I'll grow old and die, and I am very old now. Old enough to be called a relic. I must resolve Tom's legacy before I go. I can't risk leaving another Dark Lord behind for future generations. Jonathan's anger flared. He jumped to his feet, pointing directly at Dumbledore's face. So you choose not to trust a child? And worse, you deliberately place him in a cruel situation just to test his potential. Dumbledore, did you think you were the so-called greatest white wizard from the start? The wizarding world may revere you, but I knew you before your sainthood. The place where I slumbered remembers me, but it was your sister's death that changed you. Only then did you become the white wizard the world now idolizes. He took a deep breath, his voice filled with scorn. Do all those who call you the savior of the wizarding world and its greatest white wizard know that you were once a master of the dark arts, that even now you no longer need to rely on them to win your battles? Dumbledore looked ashamed. Had he been facing anyone else, he might not have shown such a reaction. But Jonathan knew him from the days when he and Gellert Grindelwald had sought the Deathly Hallows together. Ariana's death had jolted Dumbledore from his delusions. But even then he had turned a blind eye to Gellert's deeds for too long. Only when there was no other way had he dueled him. The heated room grew silent. Neither man spoke of Phineas anymore because they both understood the difficulty of solving the situation, even with Dumbledore's intervention. Because of Dumbledore's earlier deliberate inaction, Phineas's predicament had spread throughout Hogwarts. That reality could not be undone. All they could do now was watch and wait to see how Phineas would respond, and help only if truly necessary. The next day Slytherin had no morning classes, and Phineas took the rare chance to catch up on sleep. His ongoing isolation was giving him a serious headache. He had originally chosen Hogwarts over Skull because it was more familiar, and because he had believed that he could form lifelong friendships here. bonds that were common among those who studied together in the same year. But reality had dealt him a harsh blow, and now he was desperate for a way to break the deadlock. Slytherin's only class that day was Transfiguration. With Professor McGonagall, all first through fifth year students were required to take Transfiguration. Only those who achieved high marks on their ODADOL exams could pursue any DT-level Transfiguration in their 6th and 7th years. Professor McGonagall was strict. Before the lesson began, she said firmly, "Transfiguration is among the most complex and dangerous branches of magic you will study at Hogwarts." And that was likely why she was so stern. "Anyone planning to fool around in my class should leave immediately and not return. You've been warned." With that, she gave a dazzling demonstration, transfiguring a table into a pig and back again, officially beginning the lesson. Thanks to years of practice and the system's card draws, Phineas quickly completed the assignment, transforming a matchstick into a needle. "Excellent. Mr. Black has succeeded in the transfiguration. I will award Slytherin 5 points." It was the first time Phineas had earned any house points. As Professor McGonagall finished speaking, the Academy treasure chest progress bar on his system interface jumped by 20%. Clearly, the 100 points required to open the chest did not align one-to-one with actual house points. Based on this, it seemed the conversion rate might be 1 real point to 4 system points, meaning Phineas needed only 25 actual points to open the treasure chest. It was the best news he'd had in days. At the same time, Phineas noticed a new mission had appeared in his task system: explore the secrets of Hogwarts. It was divided into 4 stages, but at the moment none had been unlocked. Wednesdays were the busiest days for Slytherin. 2 herbology classes were scheduled in the morning. Professor Pomona Sprout, headmistress of Hufflepuff, taught the subject. She was kind, cheerful, and incredibly patient with her students. Herbology was part of the ODADOL curriculum, and mandatory for all Hogwarts students through 5th year. Students with strong marks could take ODADOL in 6th year. In herbology, students studied magical plants. Over time, the material became more difficult and dangerous. In 1st year, the focus was on Dittany and Devil's Snare. Motivated by Professor McGonagall's reward and his system's progress, Phineas threw himself into the lesson. His past reading and early study paid off. He earned more praise and another point in herbology. Later in the day came Charms class with Professor Phileas Flitwick, who had to stand on a stack of books to be seen behind his desk. Flitwick also complimented Phineas's talent and growth in the subject, which resulted in yet another bonus point. With his confirmation that gaining house points directly fueled the system's treasure chest progress, Phineas became increasingly insistent with earning more. One could even call it a frenzy.